Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
If you ask for directions somewhere and they tell you it's at the corner of 5 and Kundalini, you might be at Burning Man. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Our guest has bravely ventured forth into that world and is here to report back on it and also to talk about his forthcoming project. He is the author of the forthcoming book, Game of Gods, The Temple of Man and the Age of Re-enchantment. We welcome back to the bunker, Carl Teichrib. Carl, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for making the trek down here to the Ozarks.
Oh, it's nice. It was good to be able to step outside when I arrived and see green grass, of course, being from Manitoba now.
Yeah.
We're just snow.
Where you guys just got hit with Winter Storm Quinn.
Yeah, we got nailed.
How much snow?
Right where we are, it'd be hard to guess, maybe 8-10 inches. It wasn't much. Other areas got really clobbered.
Wasn't much. Here in the Ozarks, we've had one snowfall of 6 inches or more since we moved here. And that was on the day that we moved here in 2015. So it's all relative.
It really is.
Yeah. But, we were talking last night about, somebody, the server at the restaurant we went last night was talking about how she'd love to go to Canada because she has got this idyllic vision of a cabin in the woods somewhere in isolation. We're like, look out the window. You're sitting right on Table Rock Lake. There are cabins in the woods on top of that ridge over there.
I know.
And
It's
without 8 to 10 inches of snow.
with green grass.
Yes. So, again, it's all relative. It's always greener on the other side, even when it's buried beneath
2 feet of snow.
2 feet of snow.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you're here in the Ozarks because we're doing a series of programs on transhumanism for a forthcoming book from Defender Publishing that we're not allowed to disclose just at this point. You're a contributing author to that book, as am I. Tom Horn, the lead publisher, as well as the lead author, but also sort of the face of a growing movement, apparently in the eyes of transhumanists, opposing their movement. This is something you've been tracking for a while.
Right.
So let's go here. How does Burning Man and transhumanism intersect?
Well, it intersects in a couple of different ways. One, in a very broad way, in that it's the exhibition of a particular worldview. Mm-hmm. And in that respect, both transhumanism and Burning Man demonstrate this worldview of oneness, that there's this coming together, there's this merger of everything becoming one. It's a celebratory aspect, at least in terms of things like festivals. Whereas transhumanism is the celebration of technology in allowing us to become more than human, allowing us to develop ourselves into something beyond the normal. And so this concept of oneness really it's at the heart of so many things, including the political side, the cultural side, which is the Burning Man element, technology. The list just goes on, because what essentially it does, Derek, is we're taking a look at the idea that man, nature, and God all share the same essence. They all have the same core. And that's really fundamentally what we see happening with the beginning of Genesis chapter 3. Through specialized knowledge, you can become as God, you will never die. And that has played itself out all the way through. Ultimately, what that says is man, nature, and God are all essentially the same. So every aspect that we can look at will somehow fall into that very, very broad umbrella of what that looks like. Burning Man does, transhumanism does, the cult of world order, and I have a chapter in my book entitled The Cult of World Order, where politics becomes its own form of quasi-religion, that it can save the world. Transhumanism, we can save the world through our science and our technology. Burning Man and cultural festivals, transformational festivals. It's all about celebrating the fact that we're already experiencing this. We're fundamentally taking part in this as a model, a temporary autonomous zone, a liminal kind of a setting between the world we're leaving behind and the world we want to achieve.
And liminal meaning the boundary zone between this world and the next.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that becomes that model. It becomes that space. It's a container for change. And so it's literally like at least Burning Man, like a great big sandbox for spiritual and social transformation. Doesn't mean that everybody who goes engages at that level. There are people who go just for the party. Or the sexual adventurism.
Not exactly the deep thinkers. They're the ones who are woo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or the sexual adventurism.
Right,
I mean,
right.
because there's lots of sexual adventure that takes place there. Then you have those who are going who are the heads of your tech companies, your social engineers, your visionaries, your futurists. They see it as something different. They see this as a place of networking, a place to experience community and consciousness for social and spiritual change.
This the idea of Burning Man, and we talked about this on Sci Friday last week, and obviously in 23 minutes, once you subtract out all your time for obligations, you can only unpack so much. Here we've got a little more time. You made an interesting point that I had not realized, and in fact, I put the graphic up on the screen during Sci Friday just to show people what you referred to, which is that Google back in 1997, when it started its practice of the Google Doodles, those little comics or cartoons that they make with the name Google to relate to certain special days or events or whatever.
Right.
The very first one was a doodle of the Burning Man.
Right.
What does that signify?
It was basically Google saying to the world, especially the tech world, we're burners. We're closing shop. And that's literally what happened. We're closing shop. We're going to the burn, because they were and they remain burners.
So what does that mean? I mean, what is the significance of the influence of a tech company like Google participating and promoting Burning Man?
Well,
and transformational festivals in general, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's a place for networking. It really has become a place for networking.
So the yuppies have kicked out the hippies.
Yeah, really. And in many respects, yes. In fact, that's often what I hear. Friends have asked, so did you see a lot of hippies? Well, no, I didn't. I don't even think I saw one. And I crisscrossed the place multiple times over the course of that week. Sure, maybe I ran into some somewhere, but it was not really noticeable. What I did run into were a lot of very high-end type CEOs, especially around Camp Mystic, which is one of the main theme camps, engaging in workshops on social development, connecting into new areas of financing for some of the upcoming entrepreneurs, and connecting in with spirituality and technology.
Spirituality and technology.
Yes. In fact, we had some really interesting talks around some of those concepts.
Yeah. And isn't it ironic that we keep hearing as Christians that science and religion don't mix? Technology and religion don't mix. And yet here you've got a whole festival that's built around that very concept.
Yes. Where you definitely see elements of that. There's no question. In fact, for 2018, the theme for the year will be iRobot. So it's bringing in the technological and that, that becomes a theme that all the artwork is built around. And
the irony, of course, is that Asimov was an atheist.
I know. Well, I know. And yet at the same time, Derek, so many of these people going would probably claim either to be atheists or what they would normally claim is spiritual but not religious. And of course, that's a thing. Burning Man can be likened to a religion without revelation, or a religion of non-religion, which is what the Esalen Institute kind of was promoting in the 1960s. This is really an extension in so many ways of the Esalen worldview. Esalen is you have a
I've heard of it. I'm just thinking. Brain working while you're talking.
Yes.
It strikes me that this is like what a postmodern religion would look like.
Yes, it is.
There is no absolute. There are no absolutes.
Right.
But of course, that in itself is a claim of absolutism. I mean, is that absolutely true? Well, either it is yes, which says that statement is incorrect, or no, which again disproves the statement. It's a self-refuting belief system.
Exactly. It's interesting because postmodernism ends up becoming a vacuum of meaning. And that's part of the argument I make in my book, that we are actually past postmodernism. Are we still within a postmodern framework? Is that still there? Absolutely. The evidence of that is staggering. But we're actually, in a way, transgressing that. We're going beyond that. We're entering an age of re-enchantment, where we're looking for some sense of mystery, some sense of the mystical, some connecting point, some a feeling of an experience of oneness, something that we can gravitate to, some purpose and some meaning. And so festivals like this help to flesh that out for the people who are looking for that. So it's not just simply, I'm going to go do my own thing. You have that. I mean, that's still there. But you also are looking to find some purpose, looking for some meaning, looking for those connecting points, looking for something that's going to change your life.
Hence the descriptor transformational festival.
Right.
This seems to indicate that atheists, the neo-atheists like Richard Dawkins, are just way out in left field with their vision that as we move beyond the superstition of Islam and Christianity and Judaism and so forth, that we will emerge into this Star Trek-like age of reason where, all of those things have been put away as part of our collective childhood, and now we're adults and we don't need these superstitions to give us comfort and meaning because we're finding meaning in, like Spock, in just logic and reason. We're not going there. We're going back in another direction. We're going back to paganism.
Absolutely. In fact, I would argue that the secular hypothesis it has already shown its age. It's already passed. That's part of the modernity era, where we said that pure materialism, pure secularism, that's the way forward. Hard rationality. Those elements are still there, absolutely. But we've surpassed that. Now we're looking for some form of meaning, some form of myth. What's interesting is some of these conversations were taking place already in the 1960s, and the 1970s, recognizing that we need some kind of unifying framework. Literally for the world. What will that be? What will be the unifying framework? What will our new myth be? Because culture demands some type of symbolic kind of something you can hang a symbolic framework on. It needs some kind of purpose. What would it be?
Not necessarily a new myth, or maybe myth in the sense of a new holy book.
Right. But what would be this new guiding principle, or this new purpose, this new symbol? The Apollo space program provided that. If you take and actually read what Neil Armstrong and others talk about when they went to space and they turned around and they looked back at the Earth, they realized that instead of the real breakthrough wasn't going to the moon, it was being able to turn around and look back at the Earth and going, "That's our home. That's our place." Everything became internalized. In fact, Neil Armstrong was so moved by that, he created the Noetics Institute, which is...
Oh, it was Edgar Mitchell.
Pardon me, Edgar Mitchell. Thank you. I had reverse. Sorry, thank you. Where it became this sense of trying to find this myth, this purpose, this meaning within a New Age context. And at that point, we had the environmental movement already kind of shaping itself. All of a sudden, the image of all of this was the Earth, our mother. It was a return back to Gaia, a return back to the ancient worldviews. And all this kind of plays into it. It fits part and parcel.
One of the odd aspects of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which Dan Brown, not coincidentally, featured in his big follow-up to the Da Vinci Code, The Lost Symbol.
Right, which made it really, it could put a lot of spotlight on them.
It sure did. Was that the co-founder with Edgar Mitchell is a fellow named Paul N. Temple, who's a guy who founded the National Prayer Breakfast, at which the President of the United States speaks every year.
Yes, I know. There's a lot of influence that oozes out of that.
And Christians get all upset when, there's a rumor going around that President Obama is going to do away with the National Prayer Breakfast. Well, that, given its origins, that might not necessarily be a bad thing. Although, we can as Christians, we can co-opt their stuff just like they can co-opt our stuff. Anyway, but yes, that it is that intriguing that Mitchell, because Josh and I did a lot of research, especially Josh, on because of the WikiLeaks emails that were released, or the emails released by WikiLeaks from John Podesta, and many of them, a number of them came from Edgar Mitchell, trying to establish contact through Podesta with President Obama to try to tell him about these extraterrestrials from the contiguous universe who wanted to make contact with us and share all of this free stuff as long as we promised to be good and not warlike and whatever. For a man of science, as Dr. Mitchell was, he's passed on now. Boy, this really is an odd There are just so many threads that tie together. What the Noetic Institute of Noetic Sciences tries to do is use scientific methods to examine the supernatural realm,
Right,
in a sense.
Right.
But that's essentially what, Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, that's how they described their religions.
Right.
Scientific approach to the paranormal.
Right. Exactly. Yes. It really, all of it flows out of the works of our hands. We're marrying a worldview, a spiritual worldview, with technique. What is ritual but simply a spiritual technique?
Right.
A science of spirituality.
Right.
Where your ritual, your theater, because it's a spiritual theater, looks to try to enact some cause upon the universe. Ritual itself is technique.
Performing a spell.
Right. So all of this, it plays into it in terms of the worldview.
Wow.
In terms of worldview. And actually, the aspect of ritual is really important for last year's burn. Last year's burn was themed radical ritual. And so the entire event was, in many respects, it was ritualized. I mean, it was talked about. It was enacted. We had an opening ritual. The man, when the man pavilion opened up for the first time last year, the man had his own temple built around him called the Temple of the Golden Spike, referring to the surveyor spike that they pound into the ground right where the man will stand, and from there they survey out the city, and it's colored gold. Hence the Temple of the Golden Spike. But when we got there, my friend Bob and myself on Sunday night, we watched the final set of them performing a ritual in that particular temple, with people coming down wrapped in these crimson red roses falling down off the man. And later on, I asked one of the people that was standing around. Actually, it was one of the rangers. What does all this mean? And the she had a hard time putting it all together. She just like, some kind of a ritual thing, almost like a bloodletting kind of thing. And that was kind of weird, And then later on, I dug around a little bit, and it kind of was viewed as a form of bizarre bloodletting. This is our way of opening up the event for that year. But ritual was a major part of it. I mean, it's a theme, and so that's what's played into the artwork and played into the theme camps. And you try to mash and mix all that into, that grouping. So this coming year, 2018, or this year right now, iRobot is their theme, and it's going to take that transhumanist kind of go down that road.
So we'll take the ritual that we have developed to this point,
right,
and we'll move it into the era of technology and technocracy.
Right.
You've got a couple of the what are these called? Program books from?
They're called the Where, What, When guides. They're hard to get, really hard to get. So this is last year's 2017 Radical Ritual, and for people who don't know much at all about Burning Man, it's not a singular event. It's really an umbrella for hundreds and hundreds of events. So every day you could choose from or choose not to go to any one of dozens and dozens of events.
More there than anyone could possibly do.
Oh, I would have had to clone myself 100 times to cover the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we had 70,000 people.
Right.
It was huge. And you've got to really kind of work through, okay, what's theater? What's mockery? What's just acting? What's really serious? And it took me a few days to kind of figure out, all right, where are the tech people going? Where are the social engineers and the visionaries? Where are they all going? And that's the direction I went then for the rest of the week.
Well, talk about that. Where were those movers and shakers going? The people.
Camp Mystic was the big one. Every day there was an incredible array of workshops that would take place at Camp Mystic. Everything from human potential, entrepreneurial development, networking for your business, networking for your company, spirituality, the role of psychedelics. Because psychedelics is a big part of this, especially the Silicon Valley. Not so much Silicon Valley, well, yes, but the tech sector of San Francisco has actually moved out of Silicon Valley. Okay, it's more in San Francisco proper. Microdosing is a big deal. So, microdosing, doing LSD on a micro level.
Okay.
Or ayahuasca. You don't microdose ayahuasca, but that kind of concept. You're microdosing a psychedelic substance to open up portals for creativity.
Portals to something.
Yeah, absolutely, portals to something. Yes. So here's another example. I attended a number of the Palenque Norte lectures, which actually I knew quite a bit about before I arrived. So for me, that was like I need her to go. And
What were those words again?
Palenque Norte.
What is that?
Okay, it's a reference to a series of lectures that took place in Mexico, and then from Mexico moved into the Burning Man community. The Palenque Norte lecture series now takes place at Camp Soft Landing at Burning Man, and really it's an exploration of psychedelics, social engineering, visionary activities. So, I mean, here you go. I'll just let you take a look.
Yeah, because I thought you said planking, and it's like, okay,
no.
not quite it. Okay, members of the Metaverse Scholars Club, Creative Catastrophes, Physician Heal Thyself, Grover Norquist.
Yes, he's a burner. Yeah.
Steve, okay, now I've got to go back and Radical Breathwork. Okay. Second breakfast, yoga. I guess that makes sense.
Yes.
Psychedelic sex work. Okay. Trumpism knocks us back with science fiction author Cory Doctorow. Okay. How to make it in psychedelic futurism. Cyber acoustic guitar.
Was psychedelic futurism? Was that Daniel Pinchback?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Daniel Pinchback.
Why is his name familiar?
It should be 2012. He did quite a bit. He did quite a bit of writing on 2012. His background actually his mom was very involved with the Beat Society, the Beatnik, the Beat movement of the 1960s, early 1960s. Daniel Pinchback, it's kind of a bit of a mover and shaker in terms of kind of social change.
I think I've seen his work referenced, and probably in some of your writing actually, but. Drug Policy and Electronic Frontier, naloxone training. What is that substance?
That I do not know.
Probably best not to experiment for the first time in that kind of a setting. Psychedelics and the Future of Medicine with Dr. Naughty Lee. Well, still, this looks like the tools for navigating altered states. Yeah. Like the research that was being done by the fellow who wrote the Spirit Molecule.
Oh, yes.
DMT, the Spirit Molecule.
Yes,
Dr. Rick Strassman. Right. Whom I've interviewed in the past.
This is very much that.
Okay.
This fits hand in hand with that.
Again, how to navigate into the spirit realm and how to use... scientifically, how to approach it scientifically.
Absolutely.
In order to create systems for doing this on a repeated basis, on demand, on command.
Right. When I spent some time at the Shaman Dome at Burning Man, I went to one of the lectures on psychedelics. Trying to think of the full title, but it was something to the effect of psychedelics, psychology, and kind of social engineering along those lines. And they described this as plant spirits. You're tapping the wisdom of the plant spirits. Well, and there's a spiritual element to this, however, that there is definitely this experience where you are tapping into an intelligence beyond yourself. And now some would say, no, this is just your inner intelligence, blah, blah. No. Rick Strassman did a very good job in his book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, breaking this down. And he's not a Christian.
No, he's not.
He's not a Christian at all. In fact, he spent quite a bit of time in Buddhist circles, and I believe he holds a Buddhist worldview. He
was raised. Interestingly, his follow-up book was what he called the Spirit of Prophecy, if I remember correctly, where he had come to believe that the effects of DMT on the pineal gland and opening up one's perception of the spirit realm was the process by which Yahweh granted visions to the Hebrew prophets. And so he was advocating for more experimentation to replicate what the Hebrew prophets experienced. Of course, the key difference here is that God initiated the contact with the prophets, not the other way around. The prophets didn't, rub a lamp. They didn't take, a few buttons of peyote or whatever it is you do. I'm showing my, lack of understanding of that world. But they weren't dosing themselves in order to then suddenly see into the spirit realm. God was bringing them there And it's completely reversed. So anyway, he was raised Orthodox Jewish, and then yes, was a Buddhist, but he found that his experimentation, and this is why I don't think he holds a Buddhist worldview anymore, because he expected his experiments to show this oneist. For it to validate is the oneist Eastern view that we were all just drops in the ocean, that nirvana is the total loss of self. He said that the volunteers in the experiments didn't experience that. They did encounter other entities when they were in that realm, who were at best ambivalent and at worst violently hostile to the presence of these human interlopers into their world. Yes. So he said, well, okay, let me rethink this. So maybe the Buddhist worldview doesn't explain, okay, the Hebrew prophets. Now we need to figure out how we can replicate the experiments that the Hebrew prophets did 3,500 years ago.
It's interesting. I'm glad you bring that, because Abraham in the book of Genesis is visited by God and two angels. Yes. They literally came to him. They revealed themselves to him. Mm-hmm.
And other prophets, as we're going through, I mean, you were talking about your study of the book of Isaiah. Isaiah brought into the throne room of God the divine council. Mm-hmm. Ezekiel had the same experience, that wheel within a wheel, not a UFO. That was the throne of God. Same thing. That was, in fact, as Dr. Michael Heiser explains it, that is the true test of a prophet in the Old Testament sense. Yes, accuracy, key. But the key point, according to Jeremiah, is, has he stood in the counsel of God?
Right.
And the answer to the prophets of the Old Testament is yes. The people taking DMT, no, not so much.
Right. You're playing with a different spiritual realm.
Exactly.
Yes. The importance of bringing all that around to the Burning Man culture is it is part of it. It is a part of that culture. It's a place where that kind of experimentation is allowed to take place. Now, saying that, they do recognize that sometimes you have some bad trips. Mm-hmm. So when I arrived at the Burning Man,
well, that's why we need more experimentation to find out how to avoid those.
Exactly. So when I arrived at the gate, and by the way, it was a 4.5 hour wait in the desert. I mean, as we were pulsed into the event, wow, it was. I mean, you got 70,000 people coming in. So they handed out this card to us, besides the Where, What, When guide, are Zendo locations. And Zendo centers are places, if you're having a psychedelic meltdown, if things are going bad, this is a safe place to go, a place where you will have counselors and people to help kind of guide you and be with you as you're going through your bad trip.
Not exorcists, sadly.
Yeah, and on the other side, of the brochure is your Bureau of Erotic Discourse, which goes into safety tips regarding sexual consent.
BED, bed, huh? Okay.
Yes, including what happens if you experience a sexual assault or a rape, where you should go and how to report and deal with that.
Yeah. And what was that one event that that caught my eye? I mean, not because I was looking for it, but I was just stunned to see it in there. Was a slut garden or whatever?
Oh, yes. That was in one of the Where, What, When guides. Yes, there's everything under the sun to be experimented and played with.
This is like, and you've heard Sharon and me on the PID radio and on Sci Friday talk about the Netflix series Altered Carbon, which again, don't watch with your children in the room. And in fact, if you're disturbed by extreme violence and frontal nudity, don't watch it yourself. But it is a very, I think, graphic and plausible depiction of where the transhumanist movement will lead. If you can never die, imagine a world of Caligulas and Hitlers and Pol Pots and Stalins who could never die. What do you do? The ultimate it becomes hell on earth. So anyway, it was almost like this. We are so bored because we've lived forever. We've seen everything, done everything. What can we do that would be new?
And this is a place where you play with new things all the time. And to be fair to the people who are going, most of the people going are just simply there to experience the party, to experience the sensation. I had some really good conversations with people saying, especially after I came back from Camp Mystic, listening to some pretty big CEOs and people talking about how we can create our own secret country. Through networking within the Burning Man community,
blockchain technology,
adopting it into blockchain, bringing this out even further, letting it soak and into the pores of the culture. And I came back, and the guy who was camped right beside me, he's actually a PhD holder. He was, again, not the hippies, you know. He was like, so where were you today, Carl? I said, hey, I was at Camp Mystic, and this is, these are the things we were talking about today. And he said, hold on. He said, remember. And I didn't know the guy before the burn. I mean, he's camped beside me. He's really a friendly fellow. And he said, don't forget. He said, that's just one side of this. Most people who are coming here don't even think about it like that. But that really also epitomizes just how society works in general.
Sure, right,
It really does.
right.
Most of us are just oblivious to the worldview and the spirituality that's in play all the time.
The change agents who are working around us.
Absolutely. So all this is just simply a mirror of what's already happening.
Mm-hmm.
This shouldn't be shocking, especially in an age where we have stripped out the Christian purpose and the Christian meaning, where modernity itself no longer fits the bill, where it's not pure materialism or secularism. Postmodernism has left us with a void. Ultimately, it will, and it has. So now we have to go find some new experience, find some new myth, find some new meaning. In the 60s and 70s, that was the earth, a return now to this more primal sense, the archaic worldview. And this is just simply an extension of that, bringing it all together. How do Christians respond? That's really now the question.
Yeah.
Because to respond to this is really, in a sense, a model for how we respond to the world around us.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that here in the last segment here, because I know we're on a schedule here today at Skywatch TV, and we've got Tom Horn coming back from the airport with another guest, so we'll have to get in front of other cameras here in just a bit. That's the key question. I mean, why does this matter? Why do these transformational festivals matter? And what is our response as Christians?
Right. First of all, it matters because this is a reflection of what your family, your friends, your neighbors believe. That itself means it's important. It's also important because it is transforming culture and society. That's another key part of it. Now, how do we respond? That's really the biggest question of all. Mm-hmm. First of all, we don't respond with placards and bullhorns. We do have to respond with a certain amount of respect, with empathy, a certain amount of generosity in that regard. Because if it wasn't for Christ, I'm in the same boat.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I have to be honest about that. The approach my friend Bob Worley and I took was we set up a sign at our camp called Camp of the Unknown God, which comes out of Acts,
right.
Paul's response at Mars Hill.
Yes, I know who this unknown God is.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly, because here's a place with temples. We have the temple built around the man. Just a little ways further into the desert, we have this amazing 150 foot wide by roughly 100 foot high other temple. Mm-hmm. We've got different temples located all throughout the event. We've got shrines all over. I talked to some of the shrine builders. There was so much spirituality. And so here's a place that really in many respects is America's Mars Hill.
Yeah. I can see that you burners are very religious.
Yes, exactly.
Or very spiritual.
Very spiritual.
Yeah.
And so that was the approach, because Paul was interacting in a world that was completely built around a pagan worldview. Mm-hmm. And re-enchantment ultimately becomes nothing but a pagan worldview. That's what re-enchantment really is. A return to paganism, a return to some type of myth or meaning that gives us direction. And because we've rejected Christianity, we've rejected secularism, really we have. Where do we go? We go backwards. We go back to the archaic. We go back to the myth. And we reintegrate that into today's culture. Burning Man was just an example of that. Mm-hmm. And so we opened up this conversation. We didn't go, banging around to the tents and campers around and say, hey, we're Christians. We just set this sign up and allowed people to come up to us and say, or ask, who is this unknown God? What are you guys about? And it opened up some great conversations, really good conversations. We had some conversations away from the camp too. And next year, if we can score the tickets, it's a pretty crazy thing just to score the tickets. We'd like to spend probably more time around the temple because there's so much grief. It's such an amazing outpouring of grief and pain. There's joy there too, but this is a place where people just pour their hearts out. And we'd probably like
a lot
to
of
spend,
seekers.
we'd probably like to spend more time there. But honestly, Derek, this really opened up conversations, a lot of good conversations. And people said after some of our conversations were done, can we come back? Mm-hmm. And we're like, yeah. And they would return. And we'd give them water and Gatorade, and we made them noodles and whatever else. And that sign opened up that conversation. We just figured if that worked for Paul, it works for us.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul leveraged their worldview. He even quoted their philosophers and poets.
Right.
So Paul wasn't...
Debated them, in fact.
Exactly.
The Epicureans.
Paul was not ignorant of their worldview. He knew it very well.
Right.
I think really that's a cue for us as Christians. Part of why we do this kind of research, Part of why we do this kind of study, so that you're not ignorant.
Yeah.
So that when you all of a sudden enter into that conversation with somebody, you already have something to draw off of.
Yeah. It's like Paul said, we are not unaware of our enemy's devices.
Absolutely. So that was the approach we took, and we'd like to repeat that.
Yeah. Well, Josh and I may have an opportunity here. We're going to try to work it out, but there's a long-running UFO festival about an hour south of here, which is coming up in just a few weeks.
Okay.
And so we may try to use that model to go down there with our book and some of our other things here, because Tom Horn at Defender Publishing have put out a number of books that deal with cosmology and how the whole the idea that extraterrestrials are real, first of all, and that they had some role to play in creating or developing mankind. Secondly, so we got a number of things we could take down there as lures to draw people in, but a similar model.
Yes. And that's something that I think the Christian community sometimes has a hard time wrestling with.
Yeah.
We still think the models that we used in the 70s and 60s and 50s are the models that we use today. And while the message is the same,
yes,
the truth remains the same, sometimes the models are different. The example, good luck doing a great big huge tent crusade the way that the old revivals were.
Yeah.
At that time, the culture had still enough of a Christian ethos within our culture that worked. There still was that connecting point.
Well, and besides that, you didn't have the distraction of the internet connected, to in your hand all the time.
Exactly.
College football is seeing a decline in attendance every week because kids don't want to go, especially if it's chance of rain.
Right.
My phone might get wet, and I can't take selfies with and damage my phone. Seriously.
I know.
It's the same sort of mindset. I can't be off my phone for 3 hours to hear some preacher talking about stuff.
Right. And so now we have a culture that is really interested in spiritual things, not Christianity.
Right.
Spirituality. Interested in UFOs, interested in science and technology as an entry point to a new model for being. We have all kinds of interests in the paranormal. All of these topics are just, they've exploded. And you guys have leveraged that. I've leveraged that to some degree as well. And we have to look at leveraging this in such a way that we are presenting the gospel of Jesus Christ and helping them to understand the world around them without going into without solidifying their belief system. Instead, we want to bring what Paul did, use their worldview, use even the language of their worldview, because Paul did that.
Yeah.
And just through that vehicle, find a way to bring forth the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
Carl Teichrib is the author of the forthcoming book, Game of Gods, The Temple of Man and the Age of Re-enchantment. Carl, when will that book be out, do you think?
Hopefully in 3 to 4 months.
All right. Well, when it's out, we'll have you back to talk about that again, because this is going to be a well-researched book. If you followed Carl's writing at all, you know that that's true. So, all right, we're going to go back into another studio and record some more stuff. So, Carl, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Derek, thank you so much.
So just keep watch here, because as soon as Carl's book, Game of Gods, is out, we'll have him back to talk about it in more detail. Looking forward to reading it in full when I have time to read something that's not related to research for my own book projects. That's not excuse. That's not an excuse. That's the truth. Really, all I have time to read these days relates to veneration of the dead in the ancient Near East and Ezekiel 38, 39 type stuff. So anyway, but at some point, the schedule will clear up, God willing, and I'll have an opportunity to read Carl's book, because, again, his research has been very, very valuable in helping to understand the goal of the technocrats, what they hope to achieve, and how that agenda fits into end times Bible prophecy. Because really, that's what it's all about. It's taking us back to Babel. A couple of news items to talk about. Not really a surprise. Sadly, this should be more of a surprise than it is. A consular aide for France arrested in East Jerusalem by Shin Bet, which is the Israeli intelligence services, the security agency in Israel, on suspicion of smuggling arms on behalf of Hamas. Nice. The French want to broker peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians while their diplomatic personnel are running guns for the terrorist arm of the Palestinians. 24-year-old Roman Franck, French citizen who's a driver for the consulate, along with 9 other suspects, including 6 Palestinians from Gaza, all suspected of running guns from the Gaza Strip to operatives for Hamas in the West Bank. The situation in Syria gets dicier as the Turkish army has taken the city of Afrin. This is in the Kurdish enclave in northern Syria. The Kurds essentially abandoned the city over the weekend. The Turkish army, along with the Free Syrian Army, that is the anti-Assad Syrian rebels, backed by Turkey, raised their flags over the city center in Afrin on Sunday, this past Sunday, March 18th. 200,000 Kurds out of the million inhabitants of the town fled the city, basically. The Kurdish YPG militia pulled out before the Turks came in, they say, to avoid a humanitarian crisis, so the city didn't have to be destroyed in house-to-house fighting. This is part of Recep Tayyip Erdogan's campaign of expansion, his plan for expanding Turkey, part of his neo-Ottoman aspirations. This is what I talked with Dr. Timothy Furnish about last Sunday. The Turks took Afrin, and now on Monday of this week, March 19th, Erdogan very plainly said the next goal for the Turkish military is the town of Manbij in northern Syria, which is defended by the Kurdish YPG militia. The Kurds now backed by the United States, and there are U.S. troops alongside the Kurds in Manbij. In fact, the U.S. military commander on the ground there, who's Marine Corps General, Lieutenant General Kenneth McKenzie, ordered Marine reinforcements transferred to Manbij and other U.S. units based in Iraq to cross the border into Syria to other Kurdish positions east of the Euphrates River along the Turkish border, because that's where Turkey wants to go next. So we could see a confrontation in which you've got NATO allies staring across lines at one another, ready to shoot. So things, again, in Syria, getting a little dicey. Now, it was reported by the Washington Post last week that back in December, President Trump, during a phone call with Saudi Arabia's King Salman, asked King Salman for about $4 billion. The purpose of the money to pay for reconstruction and stabilization projects in Syria. Now, the New York Times pointed out this is somewhat ironic, since the Saudis are like the arsonists and the firefighters in Syria, because the Saudis, well, along with U.S. intelligence, New York Times didn't mention that part, responsible for the rise of ISIS in Syria in the first place. The Defense Intelligence Agency pointed that out in a memo in August 2012, a memo that was made public after it was released under a Freedom of Information Act request to Judicial Watch, warning that if we kept arming the rebels in Syria, we being the United States, if we kept arming the rebels in Syria, we would create an independent Islamic state in eastern Syria and western Iraq. And, of course, that's exactly what happened. Now, it's mostly crushed now, not completely gone. Still some life left in those fighters, but most of their territory has been retaken. Anyway, the Kurds now own much of that. They would like to hang on to it, especially in Deir ez-Zor, which is in eastern Syria along the Euphrates, because there's a lot of oil there. And you might remember a couple of weeks ago, a story that kind of came and went about dozens, possibly hundreds of Russian citizens, contractors, mercenaries, dying as they tried to cross the river at Deir ez-Zor, as the U.S. responded with a massive attack on ground and air, artillery and air assault, to drive back the Russians and the Syrians who wanted to move into the oil fields east of Deir ez-Zor. Anyway, it's a nasty situation. Hopefully, President Trump's overture to King Salman was essentially the president saying, look, we want the $4 billion because occupying Syria is really costly, and we don't have a true foreign policy objective in Syria. So you are cordially invited to take over the occupation. Let's hope that that's what this is all about, and that it happens soon before we wind up in the middle of a war between Turkey, Russia, Iran, Syria rebels, and us. And again, God only knows truly why we're there. I'm not sure that the elites who've pushed us into that situation really still know why we're there. The head of CENTCOM, by the way, admitted in testimony before Congress last week, this is the week of the 11th, that Syria, Bashar al-Assad, has essentially won the civil war. He's come out on top. Thanks to Russia's help and Iran's help, Syria has essentially put down the uprising that we and the Saudis and other Saudi allies in the Gulf stirred up during the Obama administration. Army General Joseph Votel essentially telling the United States Senate that Assad has won. It's no longer in our it's no longer one of our objectives to change the regime there. I say good, and like I said, I hope that part of that realization then is that we should just get our soldiers out of there because we're not serving any useful purpose there. President Obama said, we'll never put boots on the ground in Syria. Well, we have boots on the ground in Syria. We still have a lot of boots on the ground in Iraq. Many boots on the ground in Afghanistan. And as conservative commentator George Will noted about a week and a half ago, we're now past 6,000 days. 6,000 days in Afghanistan and still no clear objective there. Here on the home front, President Trump has hired, this is an interesting hire. He's added Joe DiGenova to his legal team, which is headed up by Jay Sekulow. He's a U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. He's given a few interviews here in recent weeks, one in particular to Fox News in which he said, quote, there was a brazen plot to illegally exonerate Hillary Clinton, illegal use of a private email server to handle, classified documents while she was Secretary of State. A brazen plot to illegally exonerate Hillary Clinton, and if she didn't win the election, then to frame Donald Trump with a falsely created crime. In other words, collusion with Russia. Now, the New York Times reported on this a couple of days ago, and of course, they're classifying this as conspiracy theory. They commented on his accusation. Little evidence has emerged to support that theory. Well, only if you're not looking for it. Only if you're not looking for it. If you actually read the 99-page opinion handed down by the FISA court last April, and if you look at what the House Intelligence Committee, the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee anyway, put out in their memo, there is evidence to suggest that a plot was taking place. I mean, communications between members of the FBI and staff of FBI staffers, Department of Justice staffers, pretty clearly indicate that they were trying real hard not to indict Hillary Clinton because, frankly, they were afraid of what would happen if she won the presidency, which they expected her to do. And suddenly you're the one who recommended indicting the president-elect of the United States. Hillary Clinton has a very long memory, and she's scary. We as a country, we dodged a bullet with Hillary Clinton. Anyway, DiGenova, very well spoken, has a firm grasp on the facts, in my opinion. And so as more information comes out, and especially as the Department of Justice Inspector General's report comes out, things are going to get really, really interesting for people who enjoy watching the political show in Washington, D.C. Just remember, as Christians, that's not where our salvation lies. So let's not get too caught up in how things are going for the guys that we like. But still, it's good entertainment as long as you only view it as entertainment. The Inspector General, by the way, is the one who recommended the firing of Andrew McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, the guy who was fired 26 hours before he qualified for his full pension. By the way, McCabe is fine. Whole lot of Democrats in Congress offered him jobs for a couple of days so that he could get his time in as a government employee and get his full pension. So he's not hurting. But most of the liberal media, and McCabe in particular, have framed this as Donald Trump trying to discredit his credibility and discredit the investigation of Special Counsel Robert Mueller into collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. Remember, again, the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, was appointed by Barack Obama, not Donald Trump. So when the media tries to spin this as the Trump White House trying to tarnish the reputation of the Federal Bureau of Investigations and former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe in particular, remember, the guy who recommended that he be fired was an Obama appointee, okay? And speaking of which, this is a story that came and went in a real hurry. About a week and a half ago, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper was out in public kind of defending himself because it appears, according to reports from Sarah Carter, who is a journalist who's been doing some really great work the last couple of years, Sarah Carter reported that it was probably D&I Clapper who was leaking intelligence reports to CNN during the Trump transition. And it was those intelligence reports that led to the media waking up and saying, oh, there's this dossier that accuses the president of really disgusting stuff in Moscow, might give the Russians leverage over the president. We can't vet this stuff, but since the president was briefed on it, we can report that the president was briefed on this thing, and then if we just happen to describe what's in there, we're not saying we believe it, we're just reporting that it's been reported. That's what passes for journalism these days. That's the dossier that BuzzFeed published, the one about Trump, accusing Trump of disgusting behavior with prostitutes in Moscow. Untrue, fabricated, but because they work it around this way. We didn't report on the dossier. We reported that these other guys reported on the briefing of the president. But of course, CNN wouldn't have known about it if James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, the outgoing Director of National Intelligence, hadn't leaked the existence of the dossier to CNN. And of course, then he went on CNN about a week and a half ago and prevaricated about his role in that. Gun marches this weekend around the country. Not a surprise. Just remember, when the media is telling you that these are remarkable young teens who've been organizing all these marches, just ask who printed all of the PDF, downloadable PDF media kits for these kids with sample talking points for speeches and media interviews, sample Facebook posts, sample Instagram posts. There's a PR campaign organized behind the curtain. Don't look behind the curtain. Pay no attention to the grown-ups pulling strings from behind the curtain. Some good news to report. 76 people arrested in a multi-state child exploitation sting operation. This was mostly in the southeastern United States. 200 law enforcement agencies collaborated on this in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. People all across the United States. About half of the people arrested from Georgia. 13 children identified and or rescued in the operation. 3 other states, Iowa, Mississippi, Missouri, and Tennessee, took leads from this task force and are now pursuing them in their jurisdictions. This is called Operation Southern Impact 2, began 4 months ago. Again, 76 arrests in this multi-state operation. Some of the people involved in this, postal worker, mechanic, magician, construction worker, truck driver, restaurant worker, an online tutor, a foster parent, a church daycare administrator, and a church youth director. Many arrested, charged with possession of child pornography, a distribution thereof. Some charged with traveling with the intent to have sex with a minor. So, thank God for the law enforcement officials and professionals working in a very dark area to root out some of this corruption. And another note, Sharon spotted this story a few days ago. 32-year-old woman in Oregon arrested, charged. She pled guilty in February to 11 counts of first-degree criminal mistreatment and a count of third-degree assault. Essentially, this woman was running an illegal daycare in her home, and she was dosing the kids heavily with melatonin to put them to sleep so she could go out to tan and CrossFit. "21 years in prison." Good. New California has declared independence. That is a potential state within a state, mainly the rural areas of California that want to break away from the coastal urban areas from San Diego up to San Francisco. Actually does not include San Diego, rather Los Angeles up to San Francisco, including the state capital of Sacramento. If New California can break away, it will be interesting to see how it flourishes compared to the urban areas of California. As we've reported on Skywatch TV, the state of California now ranks last in the United States in terms of poverty. In other words, a higher percentage of people in California below the poverty line than anywhere else in the country. And that shouldn't be, because California is the 6th largest economy on the planet. California's economy is bigger than most of the countries in the world. And yet, because of their progressive politics, they have more people in poverty than anywhere else in America. So, kind of a long shot, but let's hope that New California can make a go of it. And, well, we could continue on, but there's a lot in the news. We address a lot of this stuff on Sci Friday at Skywatch TV on a daily basis. Sharon and I talk about this on PID radio every weekend. So rather than me just commenting alone, because frankly, the conversation's a lot better when she's there to correct me and keep me focused, I'll direct you to PIDradio.com, where we have been back. PID Radio began in March of 2005. One of the oldest podcasts still produced on the interwebs. Yeah, we got into the iTunes podcast store back when Apple was still actively looking for people to submit podcasts. Now you got to go through a process. But back then, they were almost begging for people to submit podcasts. So more the fools they. We got in early, and we've kind of been grandparented in. So PIDradio.com still around after, 13 years? In fact, we just passed our 13th anniversary at PID Radio. So anyway, check that out. Also, check out the Gilbert House Fellowship, which is our weekly Bible study. We upload that 1-hour study every Sunday, usually about midday. Although this weekend, no study, because I am pre-recording this ahead of the Hear the Watchman conference. We will be in Dallas this Sunday. As you're listening to this, we are probably traveling back from Dallas, or nearly getting ready to do that. And so no time to do the Bible study this week. But it'll be back this coming Sunday. And you'll find all the archives going back to Genesis 1:1 at gilberthouse.org. That's gilberthouse.org. And by the way, we've got our own mobile app for the Gilbert House Fellowship. You'll find links to the app stores for Google Play and for the iTunes, the iOS App Store, so that you can download all of those Bible studies at your convenience. And you'll find that at gilberthouse.org as well. This fall, another conference that you won't want to miss. This is the True Legends Conference, Transhumanism and the Hybrid Age. Sharon is one of the featured speakers there this year, along with Tom Horn, Steve Quayle, Timothy Alberino, and Dr. Hugo de Garis, whom I've interviewed here on A View from the Bunker a couple of times now. And as one of the leading experts in artificial intelligence research, it is really going to be interesting to hear from Dr. de Garis, to hear what he thinks about the impact of transhumanism and its potential future consequences. Of course, as the author of the Art-elect War, in which he predicts potentially billions of deaths as a result of the conflict over whether or not humanity should try to evolve to humanity 2.0 through science. Kind of have an idea about where he's going with this. But anyway, for information and registration, log on to gen6.com. That's GENSIX.com. And don't wait, because as I understand it, we're more than a third sold out, approaching half sold out already. And there's still 6 months to go before the conference. So my new book with Josh Peck, The Day the Earth Stands Still, now available in Kindle format. So you can get it at Amazon.com if you prefer to read it on your Kindle or other e-reader device. Otherwise, you can still get the hard copy with the great deal that has been offered by Skywatch TV. You'll find it linked at the website officialdisclosure.com. That's officialdisclosure.com, along with the introduction to the book, which explains why we wrote it. $39.99, you basically get $300 worth of stuff, including some video interviews that have never been broadcast or shown anywhere before, with people like Chuck Missler, Mike Heiser, Paul McGuire, Gary Stearman, multiple-time abductee Joyce Aarons, and Daryl Sims, the alien hunter. Fascinating stuff, and only available through the Skywatch TV store. You'll either find it there, skywatchtvstore.com, or follow the link from officialdisclosure.com. So, A View from the Bunker. Available as one of the many fine podcasts at the iTunes Store, Stitcher, Spreaker.com, or wherever else fine podcasts are sold. I've really butchered the boilerplate closing this week, haven't I? Give us a like at Facebook. Our Facebook page is, of course, facebook.com/View from the Bunker. And it's a production of Gilbert House and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. The opening theme is by Kevin MacLeod. His website is incompetech.com. Our announcer is DC Good. Please remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.